When we hear the word extinction, most of us think of dinosaurs disappearing after a giant asteroid struck the Earth. It is a powerful story, one of fire from the sky and the fall of giants. But the truth is that Earth has endured many extinctions, and some of them were far stranger, far less famous, yet just as world-changing. They were not always caused by asteroids or sudden disasters. Sometimes life itself was the trigger. Sometimes the culprits were plants, microbes, or even gases in the air. These were events so unusual that they sound more like science fiction than history, yet they are written into the rocks beneath our feet. Life on Earth has never been a steady climb. It has been interrupted again and again by catastrophes, both great and small. Some left scars that lasted millions of years. Others opened doors for new creatures to take over. Without these die-offs, the world we know today would look completely different. In fact, humans may never have existed at all if earlier extinctions had not cleared the path. The strangest extinctions often do not get the spotlight. They lack the fame of the dinosaur asteroid, but they carry lessons that are just as important. They show how fragile ecosystems are, how unexpected the triggers can be, and how survival sometimes depends on pure chance. Imagine a world where forests suffocated the seas, or where oxygen, the very thing we breathe, became a deadly poison. Picture oceans turning green and toxic, or entire continents freezing over after sudden shifts in climate. These things happened, and each time, life was forced to adapt or perish. In this story, we are not just looking at death, we are looking at transformation. Extinctions clear the slate, and from the emptiness, new life arises. The weirdest extinctions are not just tales of destruction, they are also stories of renewal. As we explore them, we will uncover events so strange and so surprising that you may never think about extinction in the same way again. One of the strangest extinctions came in the Devonian period, more than 350 million years ago. This was long before dinosaurs, when the seas were filled with armored fish and early reefs, and the land had just begun to turn green. Plants had only recently conquered the continents, but their success had unintended consequences. Forests grew thick, spreading across ancient landscapes. With roots digging deep, they broke down rocks, releasing nutrients that washed into rivers and eventually into the seas. At first, this seemed harmless, but those nutrients fueled massive algae blooms in the oceans. When the algae died, they rotted, and the decay sucked oxygen out of the water. Vast areas of the sea became dead zones, unable to support fish, corals, or other marine life. Creatures suffocated, and entire food chains collapsed. What had started with plants thriving on land ended with devastation in the oceans. There was another twist. As forests spread, they pulled huge amounts of carbon dioxide out of the air. This lowered greenhouse gases and cooled the planet. Ice spread across the continents and climates shifted. So not only were the seas poisoned, but the entire Earth grew colder. Life was hit from two sides at once: starvation in the oceans and freezing on land. The Devonian extinction was not one sudden event. It was a series of crises spread over millions of years. At least 3 major pulses of extinction took place, each one knocking out different groups of animals. By the end, most of the armored fish that once dominated the seas were gone. Reefs that had thrived for millions of years collapsed. Entire ecosystems vanished. This extinction was strange because it was driven not by fire or impacts, but by the success of life itself. Plants had changed the world so dramatically that other creatures could not keep up. Forests became both the builders of new landscapes and the destroyers of ancient oceans. The survivors would shape the next chapter of life, but the weirdness of this extinction lies in the fact that trees, symbols of life and growth, became agents of death. If the Devonian extinction was strange, the event that came billions of years earlier was even stranger. This was the Great Oxygen Catastrophe, also called the Oxygen Revolution. More than 2 billion years ago, the Earth was ruled by microbes. These tiny organisms filled the seas, and among them were the ancestors of today's cyanobacteria. They discovered a new trick: photosynthesis. By capturing sunlight, they could make energy from carbon dioxide and water, but the waste product of this process was oxygen. At first, oxygen was rare on Earth. The atmosphere was made mostly of other gases, and oxygen was so reactive that it quickly bonded with iron and other elements. But as cyanobacteria kept producing more, the balance tipped. Oxygen began to fill the air and the oceans. Today, we cannot live without it, but back then, oxygen was poison to most forms of life. The majority of microbes had evolved in an oxygen-free world. As oxygen spread, it killed them off. This extinction was not fast. It stretched over millions of years, but its impact was profound. Vast numbers of microbes perished, changing the face of life forever. The oceans rusted literally as iron combined with oxygen to form layers of red rock that we still see today. The sky changed. The chemistry of the entire planet was rewritten. What makes this extinction so strange is its irony. The very gas that sustains animals and humans today was once a deadly toxin. What was death for one world became life for another. Oxygen cleared the way for more complex cells to evolve, eventually leading to plants, animals, and everything we know. Yet the transition came at the cost of countless species that never adapted. The Great Oxygen Catastrophe reminds us that life can change the planet in unexpected ways. Sometimes the greatest threat to survival is not an asteroid or volcano, but other living things. In this case, it was microbes themselves that triggered the first global extinction, setting the stage for all future evolution. Not all extinctions are so clear-cut. Some remain mysteries that scientists still debate. One example is the Ordovician-Silurian extinction, which took place about 440 million years ago. It wiped out nearly 85% of marine species, but the exact cause is still uncertain. One leading theory points to a sudden ice age. Continental shifts may have dragged land masses toward the South Pole, where glaciers spread. As ice locked up water, sea levels fell, draining shallow seas where most marine life thrived. Cold waters and shrinking habitats devastated creatures like trilobites and brachiopods. Another theory suggests that bursts of gamma radiation from space may have damaged the ozone layer, letting harmful ultraviolet rays pour in. Though harder to prove, it shows just how many possibilities exist when we study extinction. The answers are often complex, with multiple factors working together. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction about 200 million years ago offers another puzzle. It cleared away many reptile groups and opened the door for dinosaurs to dominate. Volcanic eruptions linked to the breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea may have pumped carbon dioxide into the air, creating rapid warming. Acid rain and toxic gases may have poisoned ecosystems, yet the exact sequence is still debated. What is certain is that without this extinction, dinosaurs may never have risen to their iconic role. These mysteries remind us that extinction is rarely simple. It is often the result of intertwined forces: climate, geology, biology, and sometimes even events from space. Theories and interpretations evolve as new evidence emerges, and what seems settled today may change tomorrow. That uncertainty is part of the fascination. Extinctions are not just endings, they are riddles carved into stone, waiting for us to solve. The weirdest and most devastating extinction of all came about 252 million years ago. It is known as the Permian-Triassic extinction, or simply the Great Dying. This was not just a loss of some species, it was the near-total collapse of life on Earth. More than 90% of species disappeared. It was the closest our planet has ever come to being sterilized. The causes were complex and terrifying. In what is now Siberia, massive volcanic eruptions spewed lava and ash for hundreds of thousands of years. The eruptions released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and methane, trapping heat in the atmosphere. Oceans warmed and lost their oxygen. Bacteria thrived in these low-oxygen seas, releasing toxic gases like hydrogen sulfide. The air itself may have turned poisonous. Acid rain fell, ecosystems collapsed, and food chains broke apart. Imagine forests withering, oceans turning green and stinking with dead zones, skies filled with choking haze. Animals on land and sea alike struggled and failed to survive. Trilobites, which had thrived for hundreds of millions of years, vanished forever. Coral reefs collapsed, early amphibians and reptiles dwindled. Only a handful of lineages managed to hang on. What makes the Great Dying so strange is the combination of forces. It was not just fire, not just climate change, not just poisoned seas. It was all of them at once, a cascade of disasters feeding into one another. The scale of destruction is almost beyond imagination, and yet, from this low point, life eventually rebounded. New groups emerged in the Triassic, including the first dinosaurs which would later dominate the world. The Permian-Triassic extinction is both horrifying and fascinating. It shows that Earth itself can become the engine of its own destruction, and that survival is never guaranteed. It was the darkest chapter in the history of life, and it remains the strangest mass extinction we have ever uncovered. When we look back at the weirdest extinctions, from forests that poisoned the seas, to oxygen that turned deadly, to volcanic hellscapes that nearly ended everything, one message becomes clear. Life is fragile, and the balance of Earth can change in ways we least expect. The drivers of extinction are not always dramatic asteroids. Sometimes they are slow changes in chemistry. Sometimes they are shifts in climate. Sometimes they are the very successes of life itself. Yet these extinctions also tell us another truth. Out of destruction comes renewal. After the Devonian extinctions, new fish and ecosystems arose. After the Great Oxygen Catastrophe, complex cells appeared. After the Great Dying, dinosaurs and eventually mammals found their chance. Every ending carved the path for a new beginning. The weirdest extinctions you have never heard of are not just stories of loss. They are reminders of resilience, of the ways life adapts, and of the strange twists that make evolution possible. They also remind us that the conditions that sustain us today are not fixed. Earth has changed before, and it will change again. As we reflect on these bizarre die-offs, consider what surprises may still lie hidden in the rocks waiting to be uncovered. Each new discovery reshapes the story of life. Which of these strange extinctions amazed you most? Was it the forests that killed the oceans, the oxygen that turned deadly, or the Great Dying that nearly erased everything? Share your thoughts and stay curious, because Earth's story is far from over.